Hello, and welcome to IRI Growth Insights, featuring IRI thought leaders, industry partners, and guests. For more than 40 years, IRI has been known for its invaluable data, but these podcasts explore insights that the data reveal to fuel disruption and market growth for CPG, retail, healthcare, and media industries. I'm your host, Tanya Schuckart, coming to you from my home office in Southern California. So I'd like to welcome Sam Gagliardi, Executive Vice President, E-commerce for IRI, and Sucharita Kodali, Vice President and Principal Analyst of Forrester Research. It is always a pleasure to have you two pros together. Welcome.
Thanks, Tanya.
Thank you so much. It's really great to be here.
Yeah, so you two are just coming off a webinar together last week. So I thought maybe we could build from that Retail This Week series, Sucharita, that you and your colleagues at Forrester are doing at a pretty regular cadence, I think. And I know Sam joined you to discuss insights around how COVID-19 is impacting the grocery industry and e-commerce, and specifically a shift from e-commerce being primarily about convenience pre-COVID to being about health and safety during COVID. But before we get into that, which is kind of the meat of our conversation today, we do try to keep the content as current as possible on Growth Insights. And so I thought maybe we'd start with all the questions we're hearing about what happens now, if anything, that there have been changes to the unemployment benefits stemming from the executive order to extend them, but at a reduced amount. And I know that IRI released some thought leadership on this topic just a few days ago, and we'll put a link to that research in the show notes section when the podcast publishes. But just at a high level, the data indicated growth for at-home edible spending has slowed since late July in grocery and multi-outlet. I'm just wondering if, the slowing changes suggest this emerging correlation with unemployment. I know maybe it could in some states, but, Sucharita, I thought maybe this would be a good opportunity to hear from you about what you and Forrester are expecting to see.
Yeah, Tanya. I mean, I think that the IRI data, which is excellent and everybody should take a look at, it suggests basically that it's still a little too early to tell. You're absolutely right. The edible spend is down a little bit, but from a state-by-state correlation standpoint, it's kind of all over the place. And what we think is going to happen, because who knows how long these benefits are going to last and whether they're actually distributed everywhere they actually need to go. The challenge is that consumers are just going to have less money in their pockets, and every sector of the economy, including essentials, is likely going to face some kind of a challenge as a result. So that could mean everything from trading down to, kind of more consumption of the opening price point private label goods to, just choosing to purchase, kind of less expensive items. It could be packaged goods versus fresh and perishable items, which tend to be more expensive. So there are all of these challenges. It also begs a question about what happens with delivery, because often delivery is more correlated to, kind of some premium pricing. There are often fees associated with things like delivery. So does that drive some of those consumers more back to physical stores? I mean, what's interesting is that we've discovered through the course of the pandemic that, kind of delivery is popular with every income demographic for different reasons. And to the degree that delivery is offered, people had been embracing it. But now if their incomes are even lower and they don't have any government support, less of that is going to flow to essential retailers, grocers, mass merchants, et cetera. Now, all that said, food is, of course, going to be the last thing that people cut out. And, where I expect to see more of the stimulus or the elimination impact, it's likely going to be in a number of those discretionary categories that we had already been seeing really, really suffering, like the department stores, the clothing and apparel stores, the restaurants. Kind of what one of the pleasant surprises of the last few months is that what we thought was going to be 50% declines in some apparel stores was only like a 25% decline. And I think that what we will see is we'll actually see that 50% decline in some of those categories moving forward.
Mm-hmm. Sam, thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think Sucharita, really outlined a lot. I guess my 2 cents that I would add here is this. Unfortunately, for many of the households in the United States, we've seen this movie before. We saw this movie in 2008. And Sucharita is absolutely right. Families will continue to need to feed themselves. But what we learned from 2008 was that also, while budgets are fixed, and if budgets become constrained and begin to shrink, what you'll see, and this is where I think e-commerce plays an incredibly important role. What we saw in 2008 was that shoppers spent more time researching what they're going to buy, where they're going to buy it to get the biggest bang for the buck. Again, budgets are finite, they're fixed. And if they begin to shrink, I think you'll see that happening more. Now, e-commerce is actually the absolute best place for those consumers, for those shoppers to really find the best offering that's out there, to really be able to cherry pick, where they buy, what they buy, and how they buy going forward. And Sucharita is absolutely right. If delivery continues to be more expensive, this is where folks will opt out for more of a pickup type model, so forth and so on. But again, we've progressed from the e-commerce in the pre-COVID phase being all about convenience to e-commerce during the height of COVID being about health and safety to now e-commerce being a way to make sure that you're able to provide for your family going forward. So the digital interface, the digital means, I think just becomes even more sticky going forward. It continues to really stand out and shows consumers that the old habits of going to store are probably not the best way for you to fulfill the needs and wants of your family going forward. So I see e-commerce continue to be that much more important. In fact, I think we just did research the other day as well. We're experiencing right now plus 82% of shopping experiences are now, all of them are beginning online. Meaning even before you go in store, you're looking at circulars, you're looking at ads, you're searching where to find what. You're seeing who's in stock where, and because that shopping trip is beginning online, I think you're going to start seeing fewer and fewer foot traffic going in store.
Yeah. So this was sort of in that sense, right? The catalyst that everyone was waiting for to fill baskets. So, what I know that you guys talked about this a little bit on the webinar. It was interesting. What kinds of myths are out there about e-com penetration?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, I think that there are some myths around which merchants consumers may or may not be purchasing. I think in grocery, there is not a clear understanding of who's buying what where. And what I know, I've worked with IRI for a number of months now and really digging into the grocery data. And there are clear distinctions between who and what, where people are purchasing perishables versus non-perishables, food versus non-food. And that I think, kind of is also, really, really important to understand. And there are also big differences between delivery versus shipment versus in-store pickup, and they all have different nuances. Like Walmart is really, really strong with perishables in grocery, and it's really strong with the in-store pickup piece. But we also know that Amazon is one of the most dominant players in e-commerce globally, but they have been dominating for a number of years in the non-perishable space from a, kind of a home delivery, and not a, kind of a short haul home delivery, but like a mail order home delivery standpoint. And that has implications for which brands partner with which retailer, and it has significant implications for things like recommendation engines and kind of where consumers are even going to choose to purchase.
Yeah, and my 2 cents on this is, Sucharita, is absolutely right. But also during the COVID crisis, the height of it, at least phase one here, What we also saw was a little bit more leveling of the playing field. And I point to Instacart's incredible performance during that time. Now, their performance basically allowed many other retailers to participate in fulfilling the needs and wants of consumers via digital means. So I think we're starting to see more disbursement of penetration across different retailers. Citrus is right. Previously, it was really an Amazon and a Walmart type story. Now Instacart's coming in, and Instacart's success leads to success across other different retailers. But this is a point I think that brands need to realize, and also retailers at the same time. Unlike in the in-store environment, where a large percentage of purchases are impulsive, when you come online, because of what I call in essence the trifecta that basically eliminates shopping. What I mean by that is that what we're noticing right now is that shoppers don't reshop, they rebuy. Okay, so because of auto fulfillment, because of voice reordering or voice ordering, and because of purchasing off of what you previously purchased, the opportunity for brands to introduce themselves to consumers is dwindling. Mm-hmm. And because this industry is very used to being able to gain incremental volume by shipping in a lot of volume into a retailer and working with that retailer to set up displays, what the brand and manufacturing community needs to understand is that no, you can't do that any longer. You actually need to work harder. You need to work harder, and you need to work smarter by identifying which shoppers will be open to buying which items, at what type of an offering, at which retailers. And if you target those consumers, and you do that via lookalike targeting in essence in marketplaces, then you'll be able to match up a potential purchaser via qualified lead to your item. And then that's the new world that's going to need to happen again here too. Again, going back to the point that we made first, right? It's a false expectation that budgets when it comes to consumer packaged goods will increase. There's nothing that any of us are seeing that we're out of this COVID crisis. There's nothing that anybody is seeing that money is actually flowing from the federal government to households. Right. And in that context, I think we should all expect contraction. Mm-hmm. However, for the brands who proactively seek out the right shoppers and speak to those shoppers, they'll have an opportunity to really build a substantial lead online in the coming months.
Sam raises some really, really important points. And I think the overarching theme is that for some brands, loyalty is, loyalty is paramount, and it's hard to get that kind of switching component. Mm-hmm. However, what's really also interesting is that what we learned in the earlier part of the pandemic is that, because inventory was so unpredictable and demand was so unpredictable, you had a lot of out of stocks, right? So the out of stock is what actually enabled some brand switching. And we've seen that over the years, right? Like in any kind of natural disaster, when items are sold out, that is an opportunity for challenger brands to actually gain share. And that's something that, as a brand, I would look very closely to is anybody in your competitive set being challenged from a supply chain standpoint? Is there an opportunity there? The other opportunity that I think is inherent and so important in what Sam just said is the new imperative to look at things like retailer media networks and to look at other digital touch points that could influence consumers. There are apps out there. There's a company called Fetch Rewards, for instance, that that works with CPGs and kind of has consumers doing things like scanning in their receipts. And the whole idea is to help brands prospect new customers digitally. So it is a different world, and people are, not going to be, they're not going to the stores as much. And, when they go, they're trying to get in and out and just find what they, are loyal to already. But that's where you have to be so much more creative as a brand to try to, kind of expose your customer, to these new shoppers in this digital environment.
And Sutrita, just to tie on this too, and just a couple of things that we're seeing in the marketplace right now, where brands are sort of missing on this opportunity. The first thing, and I spoke about this already, but let's bring it up again. The instance of consumers reshopping is dwindling, meaning that if you're not being purchased and you're starting to develop a share gap of what your share is in store versus share online, right? It's going to be that much more challenging for you to be able to regain that gap. Meaning, right, if your share, let's make this up, if your share is a 20 in store and all of a sudden online is a 15, well, eventually as more and more shoppers come online for all the reasons that we talked about before, first it was convenience, then it was health and safety. Now it's about being able to better manage your budget, right? So that's all going in the same direction. So, as 20, as 30, as 40, up to scale in terms of more and more those shoppers come online, your brand will get that much smaller because your share is not only an indication of what happened in the past, but also it predicts what's going to happen in the future because you're not on the list. You're not being purchased. You're not being considered even at that point. And to help brands to grasp that, we've been talking in the marketplace for several years, a strategy that we call +2. And that strategy is one where we truly believe that in the context of brands need to work harder to connect with the right consumer, to be a consideration for that consumer, to build loyalty for that consumer. That the way that you do that is that you need to invest at what you believe your business will be 2 years from now. Invest at that level today. Because if you wait for 2 years for your business to be that size, it will not be that size. And if you want it to be that size, your investment will be that much greater, and then your return on investment at that time will be that much less. So invest early, create an always on campaign. And also, this is really important. Understand now with digital platforms, even if it's a retailer run digital platform, that investment should be a consideration of a national investment program. Don't get hung up that because it has the name Amazon on it or Walmart on it or Instacart on it, that it's a shopper marketing retailer program. You're talking to shoppers outside of that traditional retailer, and you should really allocate national dollars and look at it in terms of national performance, in terms of, again, how you're capturing those consumers, making them aware of your product, meeting their needs, and then most importantly, being on their list so they can not only buy you once, but that they can have that loyalty to buy you on and on and on from going forward.
The information that you guys are bantering back and forth with is so rich. But it brings up a couple things. So can you talk a little bit more about Instacart's hold on online grocery delivery, and even going back to the retailers, which ones are gaining share? And I know you've talked about this before, Sam. Which ones are gaining share and at whose expense?
Yeah, so Amazon is losing share. Let's start there. Amazon's powerhouse is non-edible consumable brands, right? But as more and more edibles are coming online, the edible side of the business is actually growing faster. And it becomes straight math. When the edible side of the business is growing faster, the overall size of the industry is getting larger, but the consumables, that means that their share is getting smaller then, right? So in that context, Amazon is losing share and growing slower than what we're seeing right now, which is being driven by Instacart and by Walmart and by Kroger, so forth and so on. I spoke about this before. The fact that we are where we are in terms of e-commerce and penetration and retailer share right now has everything to do with which retailers invested in building out the infrastructure. The pent-up demand was always there. Being able to fulfill your needs and wants through the infrastructure of a retailer is what has caught up to us finally and needs to continue to be developed. So to answer your question, we're seeing Amazon continue to lose share in the marketplace because of the edibles. Because of edibles, we're seeing that Walmart and Instacart and all the other click and collect big retailers like Kroger and so forth are continuing to grow share as well too, as more and more shoppers, especially with COVID. Everyone was very fine with buying Lysol wipes or buying other consumables online, and there might have been a little bit of a slow walk in getting to fresh or edible type categories. But once COVID hit, all of a sudden, having to wear gloves, having to bring sanitizer, having to wear masks, potentially wearing shields when you went grocery shopping, that became a new barrier for people to go in store, and became that much easier for them to transfer all those edible purchases online.
So I know we've talked a little bit about data. In this rapid rise of e-commerce, what is the data telling us? Like, are you still seeing any, pandemic specific stocking up? What are you seeing?
When it comes to online, the peak was in April and May, and since the peak, the peak has come down, but the peak is still more than twice what it was going into the pandemic. So to answer your question, during the peak it was higher, but right now the business is still two plus what it was going in. So it's almost like a step. We were coming in here, and now we're twice that going out. I think with what we need to consider here is that towards the back half of the year, I think more and more purchases will continue to go online. More and more regular purchases will go online. We've talked about this already. E-commerce has already been proven to be an effective way to be able to manage your budget by being able to purchase what you need, where you need to be able to buy it. Amazon, to be very clear, Amazon, is almost like Walmart on steroids in the context of always having the lowest price. So much so, having been in the industry, knowing that their price is sometimes below what the cost of the product is. That's just going to continue to accentuate the competitive space in the online marketplace. Traditional retailers like Walmart and Kroger are not going to stand for that, so they're going to, in essence, follow Walmart's lead in terms of offering great pricing. And again, the consumer will get the biggest benefit of it going forward. But no, to answer your question, business is more than twice what it was before before COVID, and it is slightly down from the peak of COVID, but we do expect it to continue to grow at a considerable rate going forward. So, Rita, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, we are expecting that as long as we are in a pandemic, which seems like it is going to be at least another several quarters, definitely through 2020 and through much of 2021 as well, that we will see this continued shift to e-commerce. And I think that there's been a lot of debate as to how much of online retail sticks. And I think that there are a couple of schools of thought. When you looked at what happened, for instance, in China, they got through their cycle pretty quickly. I mean, they had issues and lockdowns in Q4, but they were pretty much through the worst of it by the time it came to Western markets. So the amount of time that it affected them was less than what we are seeing. So what happened was that they only leapfrogged maybe a year. And I think that in the United States, like early in the pandemic, the thinking was, we'll get past it by the summer and we'll likely see a similar rate of adoption. We'll leapfrog a year. But as this pandemic continues, I think that what you end up with is, just longer for that behavior to change and shift. And what we know is that about 30% of people think that they're going to get COVID by walking into a store. Mm-hmm. And an even greater percent are just avoiding going to stores altogether. And if that's the case, you have a third of people who permanently, especially if this is going to go on until this time next year, who are either just doing curbside or they're doing some kind of delivery. And, it's once you're doing that like 30 times, or once you've done that 30 times, it's less likely that you're going to go back to the old way. I mean, if we had gotten past the pandemic by now, I think that we could have safely said, it's only going to be like a year or so that we'll leapfrog. I think at this point, it's going to be several years that we leapfrog based on the pace that we're going on right now.
And that's a good point. Just, chiming in here on this as well, to understand the difference between the United States and other parts of the world. And let's just focus on Western Europe because of the similarities. Sutrita nailed all the key parts of it. But what I would add to it as well, too, is that is that no matter what happens here, you're going to have a percentage of the population that's significant that doesn't believe what they're being told. They don't believe that a vaccine will work. They don't believe anything, right? And that's just because of the misinformation that we're having across all the spectrum in the marketplace. So what that leads to, which business hates, is what? Uncertainty, right? We know that, right? And that's the biggest issue that we have here, is that when there's different narratives, when there's not a single narrative coming out, a single authoritarian narrative coming out, or authoritative narrative coming out, everyone's left to their own devices. And that's the frustration we're seeing right now, is that everyone's on their own, in essence, and you have to figure it out. So whether it's, do you send your child back to school or don't you? Or do you go to the store, and how do you go to the store, and how do you fulfill your needs and want? Or are you going to start ordering, food for your elderly mom or dad going forward as well too? There is a long-term material change that is happening here no matter what. And I think the point here is that no one right now can see when we end this phase, which means that it's just going to become that much more habitual. And honestly here too, and this is where you have to love us as a species. I wouldn't be shocked, that in 6 or 7 months from now, there's a couple other things that we're looking at doing differently to solve for our needs and our wants here, right? Meaning, like, what also, like right now, e-commerce, right? It's all about direct ship. Amazon is ruling that. It's about click and collect. Walmart is ruling that. Delivery, Instacart's ruling that. But what we don't know is what's next. What's going to come out after that? How is being able to purchase components of products and food delivery? How is that going to merge going forward as well too? Because I know I'm getting sick and tired of cooking dinner. Yeah, right? I'm getting sick and tired of washing the dishes. Right. So in my test case of
you and me both, Sam.
Exactly. In my test case of one, I also see at the end of the day, IRI, we call it a sure stomach, right? The stomach is only so big. So, how are we going to start fracturing? There was a time, especially during the height of COVID, where a substantial amount of purchases in terms of if feeding your family was done through the grocery store. Big change from where that industry was trending, right? So now I think it's trending back away from it a little bit, but depending on what happens in the future, right? What is the next phase that's going to come here now? A lot of restaurants have been reinventing themselves in the essence to try to survive. How do they come into this ecosystem now? And then how do we track it? How do we manage it? So forth and so on. So there's some really cool stuff coming up. I think we're in some really cool phase right now. There's some really cool stuff coming up in the near future as we get to see the brilliance of entrepreneurship and human species development and innovation.
I think yes. I read. Oh, sorry. See, I was going to say, I think I read one of our IRI metrics around the restaurant closures impacting grocery. I think it was 58% of consumers are making 91 to 100% of their meals at home. I mean, I know I'm one of them. And I know that, just as an aside, I have never needed to clean my oven the way that I now need to clean my oven. It's just ridiculous.
I know, and it reminds me, Sam, what you just said about like innovation. The company that I always was fascinated with, and it sadly is no longer there, rest in peace. But it was a really interesting idea. It was this company called Kitchit, and it was one of those San Francisco startups. But it was basically an on-demand personal chef. And the economic model that they had was one that only really allowed it to be used for dinner parties. But to me, I mean, the thing that I wonder about is there is this very, kind of under the radar ecosystem of chefs and personal cooks around the country, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, it's, there are especially like ethnic cooks, like, people who cook Indian food or Thai food or whatever. And, kind of they have their network of people that they deliver, kind of their home cooking to. And there is not right now any technology that has basically consolidated that workforce and, kind of, or even combined them with the professional chefs that either have been let go or will be let go in the coming months, to come. And, kind of basically lets them connect directly with people who need that food. I mean, one of the things that was, I totally, I mean, it's like, I think we're all sick of, kind of just, cooking all the time. And especially now the schools are starting again. Mm-hmm. It's like, that adds a whole other layer of, just challenge to all of your time management. But one of the things that I think has always been an issue with restaurants is that you can't always control your ingredients. You can't, you don't always know where things are from for the most part. And if you can, kind of have a personal chef that kind of gives you the best of all worlds, like variety and choice, and at the same time being able to control your ingredients, that's actually potentially a model. Maybe there's like, a new version of Kitchen that comes out that could change all of our lives, especially us working parents.
Yeah, I think we need to see like how pods develop. Mm-hmm. Right now, I think you've been hearing, in school, they're developing pods. Some families are developing their own out of school schooling pods, right? How does this, with a lot of families, not necessarily always having two adults at home too. How does the neighborhood, how does the community come together to meet the needs of families? Meaning, it is becoming increasingly challenging for families to be able to manage everything, on their own. And it doesn't make more sense for us to develop some type of a pod network. Now, bringing this back to e-commerce, right? Because this is some cool, thought tracks that we're on here. But bringing this back to e-commerce, I two things. A, the existing models that we have, today, I think they will continue to help facilitate that. Meaning, right, if we do something like in pods, where you need to buy more bulk, well, again, you can search for that, right? E-commerce is perfect in that context because it allows you to search. Going back to Surecha's point, if you need to be able to better manage different ingredients, well, you can search for that as well. E-commerce is perfect with allowing to be able to search for that, and in that context, it is so much superior to the in-store environment because you can find what it is that you need. In addition to that, I think innovation of things that we haven't thought of yet. Right, this is where new organizations, new corporations will come into play and try to meet a need of something that they're seeing. So whether it's taking something that failed in the past, but now because of the new business environment, are they able to reset and reapproach things? I think that's the really neat stuff that we're going to be able to have to monitor and track going forward.
So looking ahead, I know that we've talked about a couple things here. We've talked about e-commerce will continue to rise, right? And that there needs to be investments made to heighten the demand amid this sort of new normal. And then, this rapidly changing omni-channel environment requiring manufacturers and retailers to, what you spoke about earlier, Sam, quickly assess changes in purchasing behavior in line and, of course, I guess also in store and adapt accordingly. So, in that vein, what else? What's next?
Suchrita, I'll let you go first.
I think that one of the things that we've been talking about, because it's a little bit of a difference in business model. So we talked a lot about the consumer. We talked a lot about, kind of delivery models. One of the things that we think is potentially an option in the future is differences in revenue models entirely. And one of the ideas that's fascinated me is just the growth in retailer media networks in particular. And the insight there is that grocers in particular, anybody really selling food, it could be a grocer, it could be a mass merchant, a dollar store really, where they have, club channels, of course, too, where they have, they're still attracting people. And they get the lion's share of the foot traffic that's out there. People are at the end of the purchase funnel, and they're highly captive, and they are extremely alert and open to ideas. And yet retailers have never really seen themselves as media opportunities, to the degree that, maybe an end cap or trade funds constitutes that. That's the closest. But I'm saying go even further than that. Like it's just straight up screens in stores with advertising. I mean, I've heard of, kind of utilities that want to advertise in front of this audience of people. And given that grocers and anybody selling essentials is so low margin, anything like this presents a huge opportunity. And the aha moment for me was from some Forrester survey data that had come back to us, looking at about a dozen different media formats, including like a bunch of digital formats and social media formats, and then traditional formats like magazines and television and radio and whatnot and billboards. And the format that people said they pay most attention to was actually in-store ads, even more than paid search ads, even more than social network ads. And yet, where advertisers and marketers are spending more of their time and energy is on those paid search ads and on those social media ads. And people are not paying attention to them. And it's like, and we wonder why the click-through rates and like the incrementality is so low on those formats. Well, it's because nobody's paying attention, but because it's easy, they've captured all of this share, even though what this data says is that they're essentially not very useful. So I think that, kind of when retailers and they gradually are awakening to this opportunity, they're going to be well positioned to take advantage of it. I mean, there's some really cool and interesting, technologies out there. There's a company called Cooler Screens that has like ads on refrigerated surfaces, and I think they've got like a pilot in Walgreens where, it's basically it's another surface for more ads, and if that has the ability to influence a transaction, I mean that's a really interesting change. And if that, delivers margin to a merchant that didn't have those margin dollars before, that's a huge win for that retailer. Completely aligned with you. And I think it starts with actually really understanding the Amazon P&L, because retailers who are competing against Amazon, if they pull apart the Amazon P&L, I'm going to use, rough numbers here quickly. What they're seeing, to your point, Amazon is making over $20 billion with a B from advertisement. They're making, billions of dollars in terms of, fulfillment fees or selling fees from third-party sellers. They're making billions of dollars off their web service, and they're making billions of dollars off of collecting different money from different brands in the same context, right? So if you start understanding their P&L and you compare their P&L, right? I referenced earlier on that no one is more aggressive than Amazon in terms of pricing. In fact, Amazon has no problem selling your product with low cost, right? Well, they're able to do that because retail is actually their side business, right? Their primary business is traffic. Their primary business is traffic to get more and more shoppers coming to their site to be able to sell them, third-party material, be able to sell them, media, so forth and so on, and being able to leverage that for media investment and everything else, right? Sucharita, your point is spectacular in the context that existing retailers, what they need to understand is that, yes, they have set assets already in the context of their four walls, but also in the context of the loyalty of the shoppers who are coming in there. And while we've already defined that less and less of those shoppers are still coming in, there's still a substantial amount of folks coming in store. And if they can find a way to monetize that environment to be able to become more competitive versus Amazon in that context, then they'll be able to do more. They'll be able to build more infrastructure. They'll be able to do a better job at targeting consumers. They'll be able to do a better job of filling the needs and wants of their consumers, but it takes them to rethink their model. Right now, their model is predicated off of shoppers coming in, finding the product they want, putting it in their cart, standing in line to give a cash registered money. Someone at the cash register money. That model's gone. Right? To reinvent yourself, you have to rethink the approach, everything that leads up to that, and find a way to be able to better do that going forward.
Well, I cannot tell you both how profoundly informative this conversation has been, and I can't underscore that enough. And super humbled to be speaking with you both. I know that my mother used to say, never miss an opportunity to keep your mouth shut. And so that was an easy job for me today to hear the two of you. So I'd like to thank you for your time and welcome you back in the future if you're up for it.
Sure, absolutely. Really enjoy the time speaking with you. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Of course. Thank you. Thank you both.
Thank you for listening. Please become a subscriber and let us know what you want to learn more about. We'll serve it up in a future IRI Growth Insights episode. Look for us wherever you get your podcasts and be sure to review IRI Growth Insights. Also, visit us on the web at iriworldwide.com and connect with us on Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn.